Welcome back, HC Leadership Podcast listeners. We have taken a bit of a hiatus. Kyle and I have been here, there, and everywhere. I was on vacation in beautiful Jamaica and then had the post vacation ick, of course, came back a little ill and I had to take a bit of time to recover. But we are back and super excited to record today and talk more leadership stuff. And we are blessed today to have a guest all the way from sunny California. Dr. Johnny Torgeson is joining us, and he is an assistant chief of operations in his department out of California. And we're going to let him get into his introduction because you know you best, right? So we're super excited. And Johnny brings an interesting perspective that I think our listeners are really going to like because you are basically doing leadership based off data and based off research, because I think so much of leadership decisions and leadership, what people write about and talk about leadership is based, a lot on their own experiences and their own perspectives and their own kind of ideas of what it is. But your kind of theories and stuff on group dynamics and leadership is really based on true data and research, which is near and dear to my heart because I love when you can actually prove something. And I think it drives points home for people, a lot of science minded people. So we really are excited to hear about your research and kind of what got you into that and where that is going. So welcome to HC Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Long time listener, first time guest. So thank you. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate um, your appreciation for it because, I think in the fire service, like you talked about, a lot of things are anecdotal and we can kind of get into some silos and projection and some things that, you know, we think might stand the test of time really don't. Once you put them into practice and you try and work it out for yourself, you just see that man, this really doesn't work. And specifically, it's I think the issue is a lot of the stuff we've gotten is from our fire officer books, and the problem with that is all the stuff that we've gotten from the fire officer books. They've come from cubicles and they've come from the business world because we haven't done our own research. And that's where I think all of us come in is we need stuff that's created by us for us. And that's kind of the heart and mind of this whole situation is we are distinct in our work groups and our teams and how we have to lead compared to the rest of all the other industries that are out there. And because of that distinctiveness, uh, there's it makes a distinctiveness on how we need to lead and build teams that is not as ubiquitous as people think, or is not as universal as people think that, oh, it's like, people are people and leadership is leadership. So if it applies here, it applies all. And I would say we fall into the fallacy of composition, and we have when it comes to this type of soft skill.
And that's interesting because Kyle and I really have kind of subscribed to the idea. And we rebranded based on that was, we had a lot of listeners outside of the fire service. And I think there are a lot of lessons from inside the fire service that we can share with the rest of the world, the leadership world. And I think some leadership lessons can be somewhat universal, but I love that you're a different perspective here that in in certain industries, there are specific things that we need to be paying attention to. So, how did you get into this? Like, what made you start doing research on this? And, like, how long ago did you start that?
Yes, I mean, it started with my schooling itself. I found out that what I love most about the fire service is, and this, I'm going to be hung on the cross for this, but it's not the calls. I mean, after you start running a certain amount of structure fires and you go along all the extrications and the EMS calls, it's another day on the job. And what I found that never gets old for me is being on a team, being around a group of individuals that have the same passion for the job, love growing and building something special together. Like that's the stuff that releases the oxytocin and the serotonin and the endorphins and the dopamine. And so you just become addicted to it. Like anybody who's ever been like on a real team, not a team that people say they're on a team just by word, but by deed. And man, I'll tell you what, stepping into the role of captain put a fire in my heart for building teams that is still there today. And so that's what really was what bore all of this was I wanted to build the world's best engine company that's ever been around. Now I know that's not possible, right? But in the back of your mind, that's the goal. And so in that endeavor, I found out that the stuff that I was applying from school, because I was actually not just learning it, I was, God forbid, actually using the stuff from school, it wasn't just a cert on the wall. And yeah, I found out that a majority of that stuff did not translate well to the fire service.
Yeah, so you and I talked on the phone and you kind of explained where this all kind of went. So talk about that. Talk about your research. Like, let's get right into that because I think that's what I'm most interested in talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've found out is we're really good in the fire service at leading. Okay. And I think when we talk about leadership and leading in itself, just in that term alone, it's very much I'm on the same page as you and Kyle. It is universal. Right? There's just a lot of practices that are the exact same. Where we've missed the mark, I believe, is the point of it. And that's where I come in, is at least how I view it, Carrie and Kyle, is leading, as far as using analogy, leading is the vehicle. It's a tool. It's what we use to go somewhere. And relationships, that's like the fuel, right? Like if you're not going anywhere in your car without it being gassed up, correct? Well, you can know where the gas pedal is, you can know where the brake is, you can know, how to turn the steering wheel and you can even heck, you can even know how to change your own oil. But and then you can fill up the tank, but that doesn't mean you know how to get that car from point A to point B. And I think that's where we're at in leading is we've focused a lot on what it is to lead, but not how to apply it, what to do with it. Meaning we lead for the sake of leading. You take leadership classes and like we expect that if we lead really well, we're going to get to where we're going. But really we need a map. We need to know how to apply these leadership things and why we're applying it. And what I found out in my research is that you can pretty much accomplish everything you need to in the fire service through supervision, administration, and management. Everything, because we're very much an outcome and output based industry. Meaning like, hey, we need to arrive on scene on X amount of time. We need to catch the hydrant X amount of time. We need to, we know how long people can survive without, oxygen to their brain. So we need to get ROSC in a certain amount of time. And so like everything is outcome and output. I can be a really good manager and supervisor and ensure that my entire department can accomplish all of those goals. Um, it's reason why like when we're on scene, we don't call them incident leaders. We call them incident commanders because you don't need leading on scene. All the leading is done way before you get on scene.
Right.
And so I think
Yeah.
there's some convolution there that, we look at a lot of these outputs and outcomes that we're striving for in the fire service, and then we apply this thing that we call leadership to it and expect um, to get leadership results when we're striving for management and supervision and administration results. So I believe that the entire goal, the entire point of leadership, not leadership, leading in the fire service is team building. And the reason being is you can't build a team without relationships. I can do everything else in the fire service without it, but I'm not going to be able to provide all of the stuff that you need inside here without it. It's not a thing. And that's because at the end of the day, we're social creatures. And so, yeah, you don't need to lead people to accomplish our mission in the fire service. What you do need is to lead people to fix all these other problems we're having in the fire service: apathy, burnout, moral injury, all of those things. And those things happen because we're not building teams. We're trying to lead for the sake of leading. And so to me, that's the roadmap is we know how to use the vehicle, right? We know how to use the tools. over and over again. We're taught this stuff. We know how to fuel up the vehicle, meaning we understand how important relationships are, but what we're not provided is the how do we take a group of misfits and turn them into an actual team. And that's where I come along is I've been able to do that over and over and over again. And so I've experimented with my own people to their dismay, of course. And I've realized that that's what we need in the fire service is we need the how. Here's one last thing I'll say about it, and I want to hear you guys' thoughts. But like, I speak at a lot of different conferences and stuff like that, and you see the same thing at every conference. And something that always kind of frustrated me about going to conferences is they tell you what the problem is and what you need to do. And so here's the example: we have a house that's burning, and we need, let's say, vertical ventilation. Okay, so what the problem is the stuff's on fire. What we need to do, at least, what we're being assigned to do is vertical ventilate. So we need to put a ladder to the roof, correct? So that's where we stop is here's the problem. This is what we need to do. But no one says how to throw the actual ladder. It's just like, you need to throw a ladder. And that's where I think that's the missing piece. That's the roadmap when it comes to leadership is first we need to understand what we should be aiming for, which in our case, in the fire service, it's building teams at every level of the organization. And then two, that's a skill within itself. You can't just lead for the sake of leading to build a team. There's so many nuances and skills within that. Just like putting a ladder up, being able to balance the ladder on your shoulder and where to foot it and how to tie off the halyard. There's skills within the skill. And so that's where we're at in the fire service is we need to learn how to actually build teams because leading for the sake of leading um, is not going to get us there. And we've proven that over and over.
And it's so interesting too, because like when I became a captain, I had the same feeling. Like I just loved that position because, I was with the men and women and you just have this very direct influence, very time and place kind of correction or praise. Like it was so much, I thought it was so much easier for team dynamics because you're living and eating and sleep, with these folks in the firehouse. And then when I became a battalion chief and went into admin, it was a completely different, nothing I had been trained for team dynamics. And I didn't know what to do with that. And I was like, I'm floundering in like I'm a good leader in the sense that, well, maybe not even a good leader. Like I'm a good manager in that I can do all my tasks as the training chief. But like, how do I build a team that I'm not living in a firehouse with that I don't even see on a daily basis? And it was this whole other thing that I totally had not never saw coming, had never heard anyone even talk about that it was going to be this wholly, totally different style of leadership and team dynamics and group dynamics that it took me forever to figure that out. I'm like, why do I not feel like I felt as a captain? But it was this whole other thing that I had to just kind of figure out on my own because there's nothing at your BC level for doing something like that. So I'm glad you're bringing awareness to it and talking about it out loud because it was never something that even had crossed my mind.
Yeah, for me,
This,
you hit on so much, and I think you articulated it so well, in ways that maybe I've struggled to articulate it because, you say leading for the sake of leading. I think we see a lot of that, and just the terminology getting thrown out because of the position you're in. And when you look at leadership and what you're talking, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, it appeared to me in just what you were saying, it's teamwork, building relationships, and it comes from the heart. And like that's it right there. And then we just have to build that to get the teams because, like you said, everything else could be done easily, right? We can teach anybody to take a hose and put water on a fire, right? That's one thing in and of itself. So, you articulated it so well. And there is always, for me, it's always been what is that missing piece? And like you turn the light bulb on for me, and it's like ding, ding, there it is. Because you're right. You go to the conferences, you hear all the same things. You read the fire service books, it's all the same things. And we're all trying to do good, right? I'm not discrediting anybody. And sometimes I think we're all on the same page, and it's how well do we articulate what the real problem is. And I think you do it very well. And I think that like that is it. How do we build relationships with all the misfits, with people from different backgrounds, with everything that we're seeing in our industry today when mental health health became kind of mainstream 10 years ago in our industry. And there was some research done that said most people who go in these professions come from some type of trauma in their past. So now knowing that, how do I build teams with that? And we build teams with people from the trades and build teams with people that were in the military. And nowadays we're getting kids that still live at home. How do you build teams with people who have zero life experience? And it constantly evolves. So even if we learn something today, and we teach these new folks that are coming in today, 10 years, 15 years from now, they're going to have to learn something completely different. So I think the key is like it's always focused on building and adapting these relationships. And I just love how you spoke about it, because it's like there it is. There it is. And that's what we need to focus on. And it's another point, early when you opened up, you kind of talked about how we have just pulled leadership philosophies from, corporate world. And, I think there's always an effort to say paramilitary. And I always try to discredit that because it's so far away from the military. And I think a lot of times when we look at leadership, the fire service is trying to be something they're not. And that's where you were saying, like, hey, we need to do it for it's us, and we need to develop this because nobody else knows what it is, because it's not the military, and it is not corporate America. It is something in between and so different than the both of those. And it's like, if we want to go the military route, all right, everybody has to go through an 8 to 16 week boot camp. You're away from your families, and let's make it that, but it will never be that. So it's just like, yeah, we need to it's like we need to internally develop it, and it needs to be like that relationship based. And I love what you said. It really resonated a lot with me, and it's like that light bulb went off. Like, that's it. Bing, ding, ding, ding. There it is. Now we just got to go do it, right? Now you just got to
Yeah.
pick it up and apply. Like you said, apply it.
Yeah, and I think that's the difficult part, right? Because and you nailed it, Kyle. It just even in the dynamics of relationships, you're already swimming upstream
Yeah.
because of and
Yeah.
you mentioned like the generational gaps. I mean, just some people are just oil and water. You run into people that you're oil and water with in the fire service. And typically, what we do in the fire service, like, oh, we'll just move them to another station. Like that's
Yeah,
how charge of
100%.
them. Like that's not an option. There's no moving you to another station. Maybe move you to another battalion if it's really bad, but nonetheless, that should be the answer, anyways. But uh, there is what I found a roadmap to it, and that is what I found is building teams is a change management process. And why it's not in academic books everywhere is beyond me. But you think about it, when you're put with a new group of people, it is nothing but change. In your mind, you are most people are like a duck on water. Like, yeah, they may be swimming smooth on top, but underneath, they're going a million miles an hour in their brain and their heart and their nerves. It just who we are. It's because it's change. Some people, they'll be reclusive and they'll just kind of sit back in the corner and watch. Other people, they're looking to sabotage you, especially, as a new leader. They're not looking at the big picture. They're sabotaging actually the entire group when they do that, and the ability for everyone to become a team. But it's kind of like scorched earth, like as long as I can get that person, I'll sabotage everything else. And so, yeah. And so when we're developing teams, the entire thing is changed. And so and that's just social dynamics. Now let's talk about you as a leader coming in. You're going to do things differently. You're going to have a different outlook than the person before you, especially if they were a terrible leader, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm not doing it that way. I'm going to do it this way. Well, that's more change. And so the entire process of building a team, because there's an evolution to the team too. And so even outside of those two parameters is the group is evolving. And so like you're not just staying in one place. And so because of that, the entire process is a change management process. And so that's why I titled the book Forging Your Team, is because what I found out was it's much like the same process that blacksmiths go through. And so yeah, and so I think that's important for our guests to know. When it comes to building teams, you're going through a change management process, and we need to treat it as such.
And, this has really been kind of eye opening for me and just made me think about a lot of stuff that I haven't thought about before, especially because we have so many listeners from all different industries, and I've really been kind of stuck on not stuck on, but kind of stuck on the idea that, leadership is pretty universal. And now I'm thinking like, all right, yeah, lots of universal stuff, right? There is some commonalities, but like for each of our listeners, like whatever industry you're in, you're going to have to do the own work within your industry to figure out kind of the niches, right? So, fire service, we have folks that are living together 24 hours, going through very traumatic experiences together, trauma bonding, all that stuff, meeting and knowing each other's families very well. But, like, if you're a teacher, you have a whole different kind of group team dynamic, but you still
Yes.
need to be able to rely on your team within your grade level and your principal, your assistant principal and all that. Like if you're an assistant principal or a principal, that's a tough team dynamic too, and it's going to be different. It's going to be different than the fire service, and it does all eventually boil down to the empathy and compassion and being a good human being and all that. But there are so many little intricacies within. I'm trying to think of the people that listen to us. We have a pastor that listens to us, like a big. If you're leading a big church and all your the church groups within that, there's so many little things that are going to be industry specific. And the military has the luck of it's a huge organization and they have people that are studying this and studied this over hundreds of years. And then the fire service, we're trying to figure that out. But if you're from an industry that doesn't have somebody looking at group dynamics within your industry, you need a Dr. Torgeson to come and do that for you, right? Yeah.
So,
Super
kind
interesting.
of based on your book and just some of your experiences that you've had. So, if you could like walk us through, maybe for a new company officer coming in, like what does that process look like of building your team? So, somebody's listening today and they're like, I want to build a team. Could be anywhere in the firehouse, wherever. They're newly promoted or they've been an officer for a while and they got a fire under their belly and they want to build this team. So, like, where and how do we start, and like, what does that whole process? And obviously, we're just going to be having a discussion about it, but it's much more involved and takes a lot of time. Totally get that. But like, what are the steps? What are some practical things our listeners, me, that we can utilize to start looking at building that team?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really big question. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I'll
We might
I'll
be
try and
here
be as
on that
concise.
question for a while.
Yeah, we could literally do. It's weird. You can do seminars about that question. But real quick before I answer that, Kyle, I just want to touch on something that Carrie said because it was just so spot on, and it's honestly something that you just came to the same realization that I came to on your own about industries and occupations, and that is uh, leading, the act of leading, and just the characteristics and everything you need to influence people. We're all agreed that's universal. And what I hear you saying, and what I subscribe to, it's not leading itself; it's the application of it, dependent upon where you work. And so I prescribe to what I call occupational leadership theory. It's not a thing yet. Maybe it becomes something in the future, but that's what I heard you saying, Carrie, or you can call it industry leadership theory. But every occupation, every industry, you're absolutely right, is going to have its own group dynamics and is going to have those nuances that come with it in the application of leading. And so I just want to commend you on that. I thought that was spot on, Gary. So yeah, Kyle, to answer your question, I, I think first it's understanding where you're at in your team dynamics before you even get started. It's easy when you're first coming on because you know exactly where you're at. But when to it's almost two different answers, so I'm like, or two different answers to your question, because there's the person that's been leading or has a reputation as a leader and is still coming and now is coming into a new team. So all those different just kind of levels of where you're starting at. Is this a new group that's coming together through like maybe bids, or is this a group where someone got promoted out of it and then now you're coming in there? Right. And so the reason why that's important is because in an effort to know where to go, you got to know where you're at. And here's an example I'll use. I was flying to FDIC early last week, and I'm on American Airlines. And as like we're approaching, the pilot gets on, yeah, we're 20 minutes out, yada, yada. And then moments later, he gets back on the PA and he's like, attention, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to experience turbulence. Everyone fasten your seatbelts. I'm like, okay. And I look out and I look down because I'm in the window seat and I see clouds below us. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And then not more than like a few seconds after that, like he tells the stewardess, like everyone that's like, helping serving coffee and everything, please take your seats. We're going to discontinue our cart service and fasten your seatbelts. And then boom, the turbulence hits, right? The lady next to me, like it shook so bad. It was like the tail of the plane was wagging like a dog. And so the lady next to me, she grabs on my arm and she's like that, right? And then moments after that, the plane does like a nosedive and everyone's butt comes out of the seat and then it's more turbulence. It's like shaking and everyone's in the air. And the entire plane, most of the plane screams. And this lady now wraps her whole arms around my entire body and screams in my ear. And I'm looking out, I look outside and I see us like flying through the clouds. And I'm like, oh, okay, I understand what's happening here. Because I'm one, the pilot said we're gonna have turbulence, and then two, I see us flying through the clouds now, mind you, I don't know what the pilot's thinking, but my deductive reasoning says, oh, we're ripping the Band-Aid off. Instead of slowly going through the clouds and
Yeah,
just
we're
have a bunch of turbulence, we're nose diving out of them
nose diving.
because as soon as we leveled out and there was no more turbulence. And so the lady, she's like, thank you so much. She's like, I don't know what came over me. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, it's fine. It's no big deal. And she's like, how did you stay so calm? Now I didn't want to tell her like the long answer. So I just told her, well, the pilot said we were going to have turbulence, I just like left it at that, but, um, and it's funny, as we're like getting ready to debark the plane, uh, she's like, thank you so much, Captain America. You saved my life. And my thought was like, Captain America does not have a bad back, crow's feet, uh, like you got a poor impression of Captain America. Let me tell you. Um, but the real reason, and this is why this story is important, is the reason why I didn't freak out is because I understood exactly where we were at, why we were doing it, and where we were going. And so while everyone else was just kind of left in the dark and it just got chaotic for them in their mind, I understood what was happening. And I think that happens to us in leadership, right? Is we have these group dynamics and a lot of things, a lot of challenges hit you when it comes to group dynamics and dealing with people and then dealing with the pressures of the boss and dealing with the pressure of the people underneath you. And you're in a pressure cooker. And so people freak out and they overreact to things, just like the lady right next to me, blame her for overreacting, but she overreacted, right? For something that the pilot warned us about. So the reason why that's important is when it comes to building a team, you need to know exactly where you're at in the cycle of the team building process. Now, Bruce Tuckman, he came out with his stages 1965, and I'm sure you guys have heard it. It's the forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. It's literally been around for decades upon decades. And so as I applied that stuff to the fire service, I saw like, okay, it's way more nuanced than forming, storming, norming, performing. And it's not linear. It's actually cyclical because what I experienced was like, yeah, as soon as we get to what I call phase, depending on people leaving, the seasons in people's life, COVID, just external stuff, that can put you back in any one of these other phases as you are maneuvering through this process of building a team. And so I know that's a long answer, but I don't want to shortchange people like, oh, here's 3 easy steps. That's not how it works. That's why
Yeah.
it's truly a skill. Just like anything else, like when you guys first learned, rope rescue and you started learning, mechanical advantage and how to tie compound system versus complex systems and all the different anchors and you name it, right? Like That's a lot. It was a lot. But after you do it for a while and a while and a while, it's not as complex as it was in the beginning. And I think that's what happens with this team. As I teach people team dynamics in the fire services, it is a lot. And people are just kind of overloaded with it. But the more you do it and the more you practice this stuff, the more it becomes second nature. And so to be more specific, let's pick one. Let's just pick a brand new fire officer, right? They're coming into their team. Here's what I would say to it is the first part is you don't come in hot. Like you're a brand new person, you have zero influence. People may or may not want you there, depending on how big your department is. People probably don't even know you, maybe, depend like if you work for some of these departments that have, a couple thousand members, you're just a stranger, really. And so, yeah, you come in there, you need to be in an observational period. Before you start that observational period, you need to let your team know, this group know that you are not going to make change. You're very transparent about it. And I'm telling you stuff that this is what I did. So I group everybody up like, hey, glad to be here. I want you guys to be assured I'm not here to change anything. There will be change, but right now we're not changing a thing. And that already kind of like calms people down. Like, okay, like not just coming in and just like dropping the hammer. And then during that observational period, you need to observe a few things. One, what are the strengths and weaknesses of that team? You need to be writing that stuff down. You need to observe who is the emergent or informal leader on that team. And if you're like a battalion chief and you have captains, then it's who you would call like the first follower. It's the person that has they're not an informal leader because they're actually a leader, right? But they're informal in the sense of your group, of your team, of your leadership team. So the first follower, right? So you need to find the person that has the most influence, and that's super important. And then at the same time, you need to figure out what your what I call 3 non-negotiables are. And the non-negotiables are things that are behavioral, that are something that is the baseline of how people should be acting and interacting with each other on the team. So don't think of 3 non-negotiables of like, hey, if I'm an engine captain, I should never beat you to the engine. That's not a non-negotiable, right? Like that can be a standard, but non-negotiable is a behavioral standard that we are all on the same page of like, hey, here's a baseline of how we're going to treat and act around each other. So I'll tell you real quick, my 3 non-negotiables are there's no non-negotiable for a negative attitude. You can have a bad day. I'm not talking about that, but we all know what we're talking about. The person that comes in with the toxic attitude every single day, that's a non-negotiable. And so you set that standard from the beginning on a behavioral thing. We're not doing that here. Understand that. Now, I'm not saying to have that conversation in the beginning. I'm saying you need to start thinking about what your non-negotiables are if you haven't figured those out. The other one is come to work, ready to work. There's too many firefighters that come to work and, they got side hustles going on. They got vacations going on, and they're looking to come to work and just do as little as possible to relax. And that's not all of them, it's not even half of them, but there are those people that do that. And it creates a terrible environment for everybody who is a go-getter and wants to get after it. And so that's a non-negotiable. Like, don't come to work not ready to work. Now, here's the caveat to that is we need to optimize our teams. So this is what I tell my captains is like, hey, it's come to work, ready to work, but you need to figure out what that tempo looks like on a shift to shift basis. Because if there's tons of overtime, you've just been getting killed all night on calls. Maybe someone's going through a season in their life. I let you figure that out as a leader. You need to optimize it, but certainly don't come to work with the feeling that you're not going to work today. It's a mindset, right? That you establish from the beginning. And then the next thing is respect. We worry so much about all these little things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, but then will allow firefighters and captains and chief officers, heaven forbid, just talking smack about each other. Like, why are you worried about uniforms when this guy has just ran this other person's name through the dirt? Like, so that's why it's a non-negotiable. If we can have a baseline there, we can work from everything else. And a non-negotiable is a non-negotiable. There's no grace. Everything else, and it's like, I tell my captains, how hard is it to come to work with a neutral or positive attitude, how hard is it just to come to work expecting to work? How hard is it not to talk smack around? I'm not even asking a lot. That's just a baseline of fundamental human behavior that we're going to establish here in this department. And then so from there, like, yeah, like once we get that down, like now we can start talking about like the standards, that we normally, issue and talk about. So as a new company officer, you need to figure that out. You need to have some non-negotiables. And then, once you get done with that observational period and you write all this stuff down, you need to sit down with whoever that emergent leader is. And I've done it with every single team from the very first team I ever got, from my health clubs that I own to the fire service, you name it. I've always done this. And that is, I pull that person to the side and I say, hey, I want you to understand something. You are the most influential person on our team. This team is going to be made or break with, it's going to be made or broken because of you. Uh, this right here, it's just rank. It means nothing. What has real power is influence, and I can't do it without you. I need you. And I tell you what, you tell people that are not in charge, and it blows their mind because wait a minute, you're the one in charge, and you're saying this team is made or broken with because of me. They don't ever have those conversations. It's not really said, but it's the truth. And so what I tell people is if you're leading alone, you're managing, because there's always going to be someone in that group that has just as much influence or more than you. And so you better be partnering with them. You better be going in the same direction, because if you're swimming against each other, you're never going to build a team. It's never happening. Um, and so, yeah. And so as a brand new captain, you need to find that emergent leader and have that conversation. And then boom, once you have that conversation, you guys are on the same page. And mind you, I want you to understand this. It's a lot of times it's the negative person in the room. It's not even like the positive person. So don't go off the person that you have a relationship with, or you're like, oh, that's a positive person. I'll go. No, it needs to be the person that has the most influence. And so regardless of that, 100% of the time, they've always said yes. And 100% of the time, if you're genuine and you're authentic about that partnership, which I have been, they follow through with it, because they do want to work on a great team, and they do want to partner up with the leader. And it, no matter how negative they were in the past, because typically people are negative for a reason, right? And so, but yeah, once you get done with that, have a conversation with your crew now, and you go over your observational period. And what I've done every single time is they typically expect you to go over all the weaknesses. Tell me that's not what happens when you sit down with like we need to fix this, we need to fix this. No, no, no. What I tell them is, in general, I'll tell them like, hey, right now we're death by 1,000 razor blades. We got a lot of things you need to work on, but I'll tell you what, this is what we're good at, and this is what we're going to focus on. You focus on the strengths, and you give positive reinforcement, and then in the background, what's happening behind the scenes, behind the curtain, you're working on the weaknesses. Right? You have a plan for that, and you're working on that with your emergent or informal leader or first follower. That stuff's happening, but that's not stuff that you need to focus on as a team dynamic, right? You focus on the strengths, and then you start to build what we call a team identity. But yeah, from there, you need to make sure, as a brand new, and this is the last thing I'll say about first starting as a team, you need to go through the what I like to call the "you suck" phase. And this is the part where 90% of fire officers try and skip, because they want to be liked. We build a bunch of frat houses in the fire service because we think leadership is the most popular. We do. Like, if I'm popular and people like working for me, I'm a good leader. That's farthest from the truth, because what it builds is unprofessionalism, and typically that's when the management labor things, the divide starts getting bigger and bigger. And so they're actually the popular captain is typically the people that are doing the worst. Not always, but that I've noticed, that the popular captain, I'm probably gonna piss some captains out there off, but they're the ones doing the most to the fire service, because they have the influence and they have the ability to lead people. And the more you make management the enemy, the more popular you get because, a common enemy makes really strong bonds. With that said, you need to lay standards down now. Now that you have your non negotiables, you follow up on those things. You need to have standards. This is why I call it the heating phase. You need to put people in an uncomfortable environment for their behavior to change. To get everybody doing the same thing and being on the same page, you need to heat up the environment. Just like we're not going to change a cold piece of steel unless we put them in an environment that gets heated up in an uncomfortable positive state. Now we can actually start making and shaping and really molding behavior. People need to be put in the same environment because they will not change in a complacent state. That's what I would suggest first starting out. I know I threw a
So
lot
many
of,
things. No,
yeah.
so good, so good. Because you were you started, talking about, you're not going to go in and make change, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, yes, I agree with that, but I'm thinking unless there are some, and then you said non-negotiables, like right off the bat, like new team, when I'm not going to change the whole deal, but we are going to treat each other with this level of respect. We're going to, and you brought up the non-negotiables. So that's like the perfect blend of I'm not globally changing everything, but there are these baseline kind of things that are non-negotiable that we're going to do as a team. And I love that kind of the marrying of those two things together. I think that's beautiful. And the heating up, because I think people get stuck. Uh, they get stuck on, okay, I've set my expectations. These are the non-negotiables. Like we're kind of rolling, and then they don't like what's next. It's like that heating up. You've got to, and that's where you develop your critical thinkers, and that's where that's where the real juice comes in, I think, is that heating up when you can get to that next level. That's doing this. That's the sauce right there. I love it. Such good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic to give the practical steps, and a lot of times that's what most people are looking for. Is like, how, right? That how and how to get there. And when we can break it down into simple steps, it's like, oh, and I know we're talking about maybe company officer level, right now, but even for new people coming in, like these are the things that are on the horizon. Now, don't think 10 years down your career, you still have a lot of things to learn your first few years, and every year you're on the job. But those first few years, you're focusing on basic tasks and stuff. But start thinking about, that's like where everything that we talk about, values and all this stuff comes in. Because now you're going to start developing your own non-negotiables. Like, what do you value the most? And as you progress in your career and you're getting better at the basic skills and you're ready to start taking next steps, well, those values come in. And when you get that opportunity, what are your non-negotiables? How are you going to approach it? It's such a great way when we look at, like, I don't like the word succession planning. I like more continuity. Like, how do we keep this going and keep this going forward? And because then it just becomes an example. So these new people coming in, this is what I did, and it doesn't really matter about what the culture is right now because it's going to be different, right? The team is going to be different in 10 years or 15 years when that probie today is becoming an officer, but teaching them that adaptability, like how you approach this. And if you have your non-negotiables, that it's always that. And now as we move down and you start developing your teams, you're going to bring that in, but it's going to be different than now. So it's I think just a great practical steps that it fit every rank, right? And it's not just in the fire service. If you're building teams anywhere, like this is it. Like, what are your non-negotiables for anything that you're doing? What are your values? What are you sticking hard to? And find those places that want that and want you to be a part of that and building those teams. So yeah, I think it's some great stuff for sure.
Yeah, and our new people, it's so practical even for them that okay, once you're solid at your skills, you understand your values and where you're coming from. Strive to be that influential person that the captain can come to. So like you may not even be the senior guy, but like you're the influential person. Like strive to be that person that an officer could come to and get your help because you're solid not only in your skills but in yourself. So I think that's a great next step for somebody trying to, progress and learn, and then you're learning alongside an officer, and when it's time for you to promote and have that formal leadership role, you're solid, you're ready.
Yeah.
It's very, very
Just to touch on
practical.
something that Kyle said, because you're spot on, is it's important. I think you hit on a really good point, Kyle. It's super important that you make it your own, because anything you try and copy from another person is just kind of a bastardized version of it, and it sucks. But when you make it your own, that's when you can really successfully implement it, but most importantly, improve upon it. As opposed to just try and copy and paste what someone else is doing. And so even as I say this stuff and I put it out, um, uh, the whole goal is for you, as a company officer, battalion chief, fire chief, whatever, it doesn't matter, to all this is a foundation. Okay, like here's a step. How can I make that step my own? So,
Hmm.
for example, like, we get taught how to tie a halyard. Like, okay, here's the basic steps of tying a clove hitch or, a ladder knot, but here's how I'm going to accomplish doing the clove hitch, right? And so, like, put your hand in different places and maybe go a different route, but it looks the same in the end. And so I think that's important for us when we do this leadership journey is to truly make it our own. One, so we can actually accomplish it well, but two, it's the only way to really improve upon the process.
Yeah, Kyle and I are firm believers in, the authentic style. It's got to be like I tried for so long because I didn't there were not a lot of female leaders ahead of me and where I am. And so I was trying all these other styles that were I thought, I needed this very what I thought was a masculine style of leadership, a very authoritative kind of style, which really was not a male or female thing. It was just the only thing I'd been watching. And then I thought my approach was too soft. And I thought it was because I was a woman, but it really wasn't. I just had never seen anyone kind of do my style of leadership. And once I leaned into it, I was like, this is the only way I can do it. It's not going to work any other way. So it's this or nothing for me. So
Yeah.
Kyle and I are
No,
very
I
firm
love that.
believers in it's got to be your own way.
Yeah, I like to call it disrespecting the norm.
Yeah, I like
You
that.
need you need to disrespect the norm. And that is like I see too many company officers or chief officers, they take over a position and they're copy and paste of the last person who did it. And the ironic thing about it is they were talking smack about the last person who did it. And they literally become that person because
Totally, dude.
it's all they know.
Yes.
Bro, like what is happening here? And so like if we understand that we do need to lead differently, it doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, but like Carrie's point is how you do that is you're just authentic to yourself and inherently you're going to lead differently doing that. It's going to look different. And on top of it too, just even on our own like position descriptions, I know this isn't really what we're talking about, but since we're on the topic, I see too many people think that because this is how someone carried out the position before them, this is how I need to be a deputy chief or assistant chief, when really those people were making it up based off the people before them who were making it up, based off the people before them were making it up. And so, you know what that means? You get to make it up yourself, especially in the fire service. There is really no confines on what you can do with your position. It's only limited by your limited beliefs, to be honest with you. Especially if you have a really supportive staff, which I believe most of the fire service does. Don't be wrong. There's going to be a listener right now like, no, you don't have to work for my staff. I get it. There's going to be, that out there. But for the most part, you know, we're going to be able to really just experiment with even the positions that we're in, not just our leadership style.
And to go back earlier, and you were talking about the airplane example and knowing where you're going, and your calmness came from that. And I think too, in when you have a new team and or you're a new leader, like a new deputy chief, and you're trying it out. I know for me personally, as a team member, I also greatly appreciate a little bit of knowing where we're going. Like, hey, the pilot said this, and because of that, I believe this is going to happen, and this is what we're shooting for. So, like, I'm a over communicator at work because I like to be over communicated too. I don't want to be micromanaged. Don't get me wrong. I am very much a Gen Xer, and I'm very independent, but I like a lot of information because then I don't feel left out. I don't want to feel left out. Like I want to know kind of, but it's helpful to know, oh, okay, that's why we're trying to do this, or that's why this feels different, or, some uncertainty. because we're trying something out. Okay, good enough. I'm good with that. But I think your teams do very well when they have the roadmap too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's honestly, it's why so the four-stage process of forging the change management process, that's just what the leader does, right? It's heating, it's shaping, it's cooling, and it's polishing. Those are the four steps. And we don't have enough time to go on all of them today, but that's what you do, right? And then within those steps, because those are just the wave tops, then there's the steps within the steps, right? But the knowing where you're going, that's something that I also developed, and that is that phase model I'm talking about. And there's 6 phases that I found out that every single team that I've been on just goes through. And that is a chaos phase. And that doesn't mean like running around with your hair on fire kind of chaos. It could mean that, but a lot of times it just means internal chaos. But what I like to call controlled chaos. We got some norms set. We understand the non-negotiables, but we're still all working in silos and we have zero trust for each other still. What we have is a baseline right now, which we didn't have in the beginning, which is why we were in chaos. Then we have controlled chaos. And then we get into the phase that 90%, I'm telling you, it's probably more than that. 90% of most of the fire service teams are in. And that is what I call the erratic phase. And I know you guys can relate to this. And that is the whole, hey, we're going 2 steps, 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. Like every time I think like, oh man, we're getting there, we're doing well. And then you come back from vacation or whatever, and you're like, what the heck happened? It's like the last 6 months of all the stuff we're working on, and we've completely regressed. And so you just like, it's that tug and pull of going back and forth with performance that we struggle with. And so I call that the erratic phase. And the thing is if you did everything right in the beginning, if you went through the you suck phase, right, and you're building relationships and you partnered with your informal leader, you can actually get through the erraticness of performance. But the problem is we skip all that stuff. And so you know what we stay in the fire service? The erraticness of performance, because you're not doing all those things because we haven't been given the roadmap on how to apply leadership. And so we just, it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And then, but if you did do it right, then the next thing you get into is, and I love this, is you get into what you call the identity phase. And the identity phase is this, is if you're doing it right, you should, as a leader, have message discipline on what separates your group of misfits from everyone else. Like we talked about in the beginning, we're pack animals. Identity is huge, even just for you as a person. Typically, people go insane when they lose their identity, just clinically. Groups also need an identity because all it is just a conglomerate of individuals, right? It's just a group of individuals. So the group itself, and for it to become an actual team, it needs an identity. And here's the reason why, is because a group of people will not protect something, will not hold each other accountable to something that doesn't have a distinctiveness behind it. So as a leader, you need to build a group identity so that way you can have peer-to-peer accountability. Because I can tell you what, once you start getting a few early adopters of this identity, they're calling each other out on the carpet on things now because they want to protect their identity. That's their group now. And then on top of that, it's not just protecting the group. Now it becomes this motivational factor, this kind of synergistic thing where because this is who we are, that motivates us to keep doing those special things. So here's an example. My daughter she just got done with like a school project and she was really happy about it. And she like did better than everyone else. And so she gets done with her story and the conversation and she's smiling at me. And I look up at her and I'm like, well, you know why you did so well, right, baby? And she looks at me and she knew what I was going to say because we've had this conversation before, but I remind her, I said, because you're a Torgeson. Now, mind you, is it because she's a Torgeson? Absolutely not. There's no bearing on it. It's the same way with this group identity thing. It's if she has something to rally behind, the next time she goes into a project, she's going to think to herself, well, I'm a Torgeson, so I'm going to do my best. I'm a Torgeson. I expect to do well, right? And so you tie that in. And so when you have group dynamics, you need to have an identity. And a lot of times leaders will just stumble into it in themselves. Like they didn't even try and establish one. The group establishes it and it just kind of naturally happens, which is fine. But instead of leaving things to, serendipity, right? Like, no, establish a group identity through message discipline. Every time you do something, whatever that identity you're trying to establish, you put a name behind it. And then you do something awesome the next shift, you put a name behind it. And then all of a sudden people are putting a name behind it and now they're protecting it. And so once you get past this identity phase, which, lasts about 3 to 6 months, then you get what I call into the acceleration phase. And that's when the fun actually really starts, because it's just momentum. That's why I call it the acceleration phase, is because w- once you reach that phase, there's no more laggers. Every single person is on the same page. There's peer-to-peer accountability. There's deep level of trust. I'm not talking about superficial level of trust on a team, because people talk about, oh, shared vision and trust. Listen, there's different layers or levels of trust, and here's the example of that is, you've heard the saying, I I um I trust you with my life, but I don't trust you with my wife. That's a layer of trust. Like, hey, I expect you to pull me out of the building, but I ain't leaving my wife in the same room as you. That's a saying in the fire service, because you can't just go off like, oh yeah, I trust him, he'll pull me out. No, that's a super level. As weird as that sounds, like your life on the line for someone, it's kind of our job, right? Like, and so I just use that as an analogy of, there needs to be a deep sense of trust on a team. And then another one that you'll know you're on a team is, do you enjoy working with each other? It's funny, like, it doesn't even get said in like group dynamics and like in academia. It's not even mentioned. It's like shared vision and trust. Like, you can have those things and not care to work with the person next to you. And so, like, what team is really a team when you can't stand the person next to you, or you don't even care to be around them? And so, especially in the fire service, you need to actually enjoy the people being around you. And why that matters is because we get crappy assignments. I give the crappy assignments as a chief officer. Like, I tell them stuff that they don't want to do. But when you're on a team and you really enjoy working with the person next to you, the crappy assignments don't really matter anymore, because there's no other place you'd rather be than with this group of people that you truly love, want to be around, that you trust, that you hold each other accountable, that there's true professionalism. That is a feeling, like I talked about in the beginning, where you can't replicate. And it's why I'm so addicted to it. You can't replicate it. You only know it if you've ever been on it. And if you've been on it, you strive to get it back or keep it. And so that's what protects the team is, guess what? Once you're on a team, also, people won't stop talking about it either. That's another thing I noticed is, on the teams I've had, is like, oh man, like they're already thinking about the bids. Like, oh man, I really don't want to lose the guys that are here. Like, man, this is so awesome. I love coming into work. We're, we're so awesome at this and we're so awesome at that. Like, there's no one like you guys around me, like it's talked about on like a shift basis. So if you're not hearing those conversations, along with understanding that you can hear that in the frat house, the professionalism that comes along with being on a real team in a real firehouse, when those things marry, something special. And then the last phase is what I call the regeneration. Things don't last forever. Informal leaders get promoted. People go through seasons in life. Divorce is a big one in the fire service. External pressures have an effect on the team. Internal things with stuff we're going through life have an effect on the team. Changes that are coming that are bureaucratic, global events, such as recessions, depressions, pandemics, they all affect the team, and the reason why is because Maslow's hierarchy of needs is still there. You need the safety and you need the psychological safety. And when those things are gone, all that, the actualization and all the stuff we're talking about can't take place anymore. And so it affects the team. And so that's why I call it a regeneration phase, because you may have to go through that with your team. And so that's why I say you need to know where you're at, because if you know where you're at on that cycle with your team, you know exactly what you need to do. How do I go from this part to this part? And so, yeah. And so that's the real reason why I gave that story of the airplanes. You don't freak out in the erratic phase when you know, like, oh, I'm exactly where I need to be right now based on group dynamics, and this is what I need to do going forward. as opposed to many leaders, they capitulate at that phase. And that is they don't know why it's happening and that they're even in a phase in team dynamics. And so they eventually give in because they get frustrated and they give up. And then they never leave that phase, or it gets worse. It goes back to like a chaotic type of phase where there's sabotage.
Yeah, I just love group dynamics also. And I've seen a few things recently in some of our crews, and I'm like, that's how I know they have a great team. It's like recently I heard a captain say he told the fire chief, because the fire chief was, worried about something and telling the captains like, well, this is why I'm gonna do it, or, it may suck or whatever. And one of the captains was like, Chief, I don't mean any harm, but there's very little you can do over there in admin that's gonna affect us over here, our team. Like, you can change a policy, but like that affects this much of our day here because we're just over here having a good old time and like doing the thing. And I also
Love
see
it.
when I'm out at stations, the crews that have this very active group text, like on their days off, that are texting each other all the time, like group texts. I feel like they usually are like a really solid team because they're
Yes.
texting all this crazy stuff all the time. And I'm like, so a group text, and doesn't matter what the fire chief does, we're good anyway. So it's like those are two things I always see
Yeah.
with our folks. That
Those
makes
are
me
all
laugh with
clues, right?
them. Yeah, big clues.
Man,
Makes me laugh.
you're so intuitive, Carrie. What I tell people is training is where you grow as a team. Emergencies is where you work as a team, but downtime is where you become a team. And so when you talk about like this group text, that's where relationships are happening. That's where relationships are forming. It's the downtime stuff. It's not the training and the emergencies that actually build the relationships. Those are important pieces, right? Going through like really good calls and stuff like that. But it's when you get back from the call and you talk about those things and you're building connections on like, oh man, we did it together. It's the downtime. That's where you become a team.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I feel like this was a training for me personally. Like,
Yeah,
it was
it
like I
always
felt like
is.
I just sat through like, a class at the, big fire service conference. So thank you for that. I was actually taking notes for my team. So, and if our listeners or Carrie wants to learn more, the book is called, what's
Forging your
your book called?
team, demystifying team
Forging Your Team.
development for first responders.
Okay. Awesome. And you have a website, which is forgingteams.com, right? Is that? Yep.
You got it.
And they can find you on LinkedIn and all the things if they want more information or want to have you come speak or do a workshop, all those things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Kyle, you got anything else?
That was great.
This is so good.
It's always fantastic, and different perspectives, different parts of the
Yeah.
country. It's just all food for thought, and actionable things that we can do. And a lot of it resonated. And like I said, I think there's a lot of people out there trying to have these conversations, and maybe that light bulb hasn't gone off on exactly what that missing piece is. I think in this episode, I think you articulated it very well, and I think it puts some more meat behind that missing piece. And I could not agree more. And hopefully this isn't our last time talking to you and having a conversation and, building this network that Carrie and I have done and meeting new people and just getting this stuff out there and continuing the conversations and hopefully get more and more people on board and see what we can do. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd,
absolutely. I
I'd
just
love
want to
to
say that
do an
I'm sorry.
episode. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to give you guys your flowers. I told Carrie this. I'm not sure if she shared it with you, Kyle, but I've been fangirling in the background, just listening to your guys' podcast. And honestly, I've really enjoyed your guys' dynamic. You guys work really well together. And so I listen to all the time and I love it. And so me being on here, I'm incredibly grateful. I want you to know that.
Thank
Well,
you very
we are
much.
blessed that you are a guest. So, and I feel like we could break this down into several more episodes because there's a lot
Yeah.
more,
Oh, yeah.
especially in you talked about that last stage of regeneration. Like, is that what you
Yeah.
called it? That's not something I'd ever considered, but it is such a big part, and I would love to dive into that some more. So maybe we'll get you back on here soon and talk some more. But we greatly appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate you.
Yeah. All right. Well, HC podcast listeners, thank you for tuning in again. And if you guys have any comments for us, feel free to hit us up on the socials and subscribe and like and all the things and share. Talk soon. Bye.